you guys can use this or use clips, there's no copyrights or anything like that. I'm a teacher, and I hope somewhere in this some valuable information can happen, or things we've forgotten over time. That there's just some foundations before we really get started in teaching. Like these days right now, well, I'm Kenneth Campbell. I'm the author of Great Leaps. More importantly, I'm a teacher, the son of a teacher. I did my 30 years from the front lines, which makes me a lot different than many program designers you're going to see in this world. I mean, a lot different. I didn't just have 4 or 5 years in teaching or in one place. I've taught from 4-year-olds in a Montessori school to high schoolers in a Locke psychiatric institution. I'm very well trained at the University of Florida, primarily in behavior and behavior disorders, but secondary learning disabilities, dyslexia, things like that. There's also a creative writing major, which maybe that can help. I'm going to be talking about these foundations so we can become good teachers, good tutors, good parents even. These are some of the foundations on how we think in terms of any behavior. And this also includes individual behaviors like in tutoring or classroom behaviors. I'll try to deal with both groups. The areas I'll go over as a setup are going to be rapport, and that's a depth of a rapport, not just smiling and acting like a good guy, but, rapport with depth. Then relevance to our instruction and what we're doing, but not relevance to me, to the system, relevance to that child. And from there, we've got to look at eliminating punishers. Education is so inundated with punishers, many of them subtle, that our children at risk and our children having difficulties hate school, avoid it. So they've been punished. We'll be talking about eliminating these punishers. Then we have to talk about reward. What is reward? Some people equate reward with bribery. So I'm going to have to talk about what's bribery. I've got to talk about extrinsic, intrinsic reward, and what does reward do, how to set up reward. Then I need to talk about recording what's happening and using what you record, to make decisions from, things like that. And we'll finish on a critical piece to any good instructor, good parent, good person. Finishing with this idea of rest and relaxation, being the best you can be. Well, there's a lot of things I believe in, like I believe in phonics.
I know, I'm dropping you off first.
Oh,
I believe in teaching basic math facts to automaticity. I believe in right and wrong. I believe some people were born to teach, and that I can help them be the best they can be. And then I think there are those in our classrooms who are not born to teach. Even if these guys come to us as 4.0 plus every award in the world, I think you're a born teacher, and if you just don't have that in you, I don't know how I can really make you good. Now, if you're a born teacher, you're already good, probably. And my job is to take my experience. Oh man, I've probably made every mistake you can possibly make. And from all those mistakes I've made and the lessons I've learned, pass them on so you don't have to go through all of that like I had. So your first question as a teacher or tutor, you always have to ask yourself is, who are you? Why are you in this world? I tried to avoid teaching with everything I had because my mama didn't want me to be a teacher, because my dad was a teacher, and that's not the real Southern macho thing to be a school teacher. So I kind of worked to avoid it, but couldn't. That's who I am. this door's just opened up all around me all the time. And as a born teacher, then boy, I'm probably one of the luckiest guys on earth. You know, I had to go to school nearby, and I just happened to be at that time when the University of Florida had some of the absolute best professors on the planet going. And then they got me in touch across the country with people when I couldn't afford to travel much past the state line. But I was able to have a network of caring people working with me in my career. And now I hope to give back to this world a lot of what I've gotten. So opening up that research idea, I'm not talking about the research of looking up how many rules there are in phonics and things like that. I'm talking about researching where you're going, the kid you're working with or the kids you're working with. Research them, know them, know your community, know the needs of your community. In all teaching activities that you're going to encounter, your first 3 to 5 seconds you're going to work with that child are critically important. 3 to 5 seconds. See, first impression, we do judge books by their cover. You're being judged. If you're worried about your old book, if you're worried about whether your computer's set up right, if you're worried about sound systems and all of that, you are throwing away the most valuable few seconds you've got. That first impression. Be ready. You've got to be in a good mood. It's important. You've got to be prepared. You've got to be pleasing, knowing what makes that child tick. And this is critical. It is not about me. It is not about the administration. It is not about your boss. It's about that student or your students. Who are they? What do they need? How do they feel? How do I get them not to where I want them to go? This is the hard part. You have to be intuitive. This is figuring out who they are to be at their best and how can I get them there. And as I'm working with students, I'm always on the lookout for engagement. Always. And that includes hall duty, bus duty, grocery stores. Always on. When you're working with children, that environment, you've got to look at your environment. Is it pleasing? And I've never won for a bunch of posters and bulletin boards and all of that in my room. My room looked pretty stark. But my room was like an aura of me too, though. It's a very pleasant place to walk into. It's just got good vibes.
What are some of the things that you might be interested to know before you've had that first meeting with a student in terms of the research and trying to get an idea of who they are before you meet them?
Well, there's often cume folders. There's other people that have met them. There's if you're going into a tutoring platform, what does your team know about this child? Where's the child from? Socioeconomically, what is the child? Is this child behind? Very behind. Does this child hate school? Have there been traumatic events that we can find out about? As a teacher, I did a lot of this in cume folders, but I know full well that's not reality. When you're reading psychological reports, for instance, do know that that psychologist is working one-on-one with that child. Very different from those of us who work in groups. Like I read one time, Charles, nothing reinforced Charles. Well, my training just jumps at that really in a second because it's not true. In my opinion, I just got to find it. Every child's reinforced by something. Might not be in a cume folder. I get scores in the cume folder. That may be 1 minute of one day in their life. They could have had a headache. So I read them very, very carefully. But there's things I'm looking for to establish that rapport. Here's a piece of research I've done. If you can do it, I tried to know what kids' names meant. And so in my large group of kids who did not like school, because let's give them the ones who didn't read, my first day of class when I'm supposed to be taking the rolls, I'm going through with what their names mean. And I just read, like last night, there's a thing on, I don't know a better name for it than our African-American centric kind of names that appear to be unique. Well, they have root words in other languages and things like this. Often these names are chock filled with meaning, you know. And if perchance I can't Google and find out what a child's name means, I'm creative. I'm going to come up with something really, really neat and positive that child's name means based on some variants of what I've got there. Every name is going to be positive. You know, like Kenyatta, I almost used his last name, Jomo Kenyatta, first president of Kenya, the head of the Mau Mau. Oh man, was he a dude? And then you get Wallace. That's Braveheart. Wow, what a name. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You know, they really tried to do a number of, right down the line, every kid. I'm going to know what their name means. As I'm taking the roll, right off the bat, when I told you about that first 3 seconds, that blink that's so critically important, bing, I got them. You know, knowing if you know if a child has a pet, I can play off of that. I'm always playing off of not just that curriculum that I've got to teach. I'm playing off of who they are, where they are, what's important to them, so I can connect. Talking about that kind of craziness, I do roam around sometimes, and I will. I'm being observed, and I'm supposed to be teaching about the Blackfoot Indians. Well, dang, if when he comes in there, I'm talking about what bait is it going to take to catch the Loch Ness Monster. And I can see my observers going like, what is this? And he asks me afterwards, how did you get from Blackfoot Indians to talking about fishing for the Loch Ness Monster? And I have to go, sir, how long do you got? I call it riding the horse. That room, those boys, and when I say boys, when we had the reading and behavior difficulty groups, they were almost always boys. They were from a rural area. They fished, they hunted, they like stories. And I'm going to tell stories. You know, the best teaching happens when they don't know. They don't even know, when they don't even know what's going on. Another story about finding out about kids. There was a little boy in 6th grade. He wasn't one of mine, but his sadness was pervasive. And strangely to me, the staff didn't like him. Maybe because he didn't do anything. They couldn't motivate him. Nothing moved him. And so generally, the staff treated him the same way. And I just found out about him on hall duty and stuff. But when you're somewhere, you're everywhere. And I did some digging and found out that about 2 or 3 years before, the 6th grader at the beach, his siblings had been drowned because they couldn't swim, and he had tried to pull them in and failed and disintegrated after that. Knowing that and getting that news out, suddenly I have an empathetic staff. They can't undo that past, but they could certainly get rid of their bad attitude toward that little boy that didn't care. The boy's got a birthday. We can do things, and that's part of just researching who you are and where you are. And now in research to relevance. My gosh, we got a whole system here that wants everybody to go to college. Man, you never been to Zuber, Florida. And, not everybody's supposed to go to college. That's elitist. I've always disliked the idea from the get-go. Tim, who was known in his partner, Tim and his partner were known as Null and Void. Tim's going to be a truck driver. Dad's a truck driver. I got to know that. Can I use maps and teach with Tim? I'm just showing you how my brain goes.
Yeah,
Of course
I'm
I
glad
can.
that too, to clarify, of course, you're not saying there's any predetermined path for a kid, but there's realities of their life and what they want to do as opposed to what the system may want to, lead them towards.
Right, and it matters. Now if they want to be a crack dealer, I got a job to do. That's irrelevant. I do not believe they're put on this earth to do that. But if they want to be a beautician and do nails, rejoice. Help them be better. They can grow to something else, but I'm certainly not going to denigrate that because of my own elitism. I appreciate the world of mechanics and carpenters and hairdressers and teacher aides and secretaries and it's a wonderful world, and we need to behave that way. Kind of our children. Our children need us. Our children, many of them are going to, once they trust us, they're going to believe in us more than you can imagine. Once you get that rapport going, you are really, really magical in their lives. Our lives go by quickly the older we get, but some of our memories of just a minute or two that happen in the millions of decisions we make while tutoring or teaching become of lifelong importance to these children who grow up to become adults. That's one of the reasons I stand strongly opposing, look at the word failure, retention. Man, be wary of the damage we're doing. There's people, you can talk to people 60 and 70 years old who've never forgiven the fact that they were failed. And I really hate it when it's our fault, not theirs. We're blaming the kids for a lot of things that are our fault. We're blaming kids because they couldn't move because developmentally they weren't ready to go yet. Boy, there's a lot of push to have our 4 and 5 year olds read. I don't think Finland worries about it until into second grade. I couldn't read real early, and I know all the stigma and all they put on you. But our job is not so much working for the system, but being the real teacher, that real lifelong teacher that works for the kid, that perhaps 30, 40 years after we're gone will be remembered. I'll always remember my dad's funeral. And they're older than me, 2 women in the back, speaking at his funeral, saying that if it hadn't been for Mr. Campbell, they would have been nobodies because they were always hiding, never felt themselves worthy. Man, hearing that at your own dad's funeral, that makes you feel for being a teacher and the calling of being a teacher. Relevance. Jake Hackett, he went to Ohio State University and learned how to do 2 great leaps there. Jake got his first teaching job in inner city Atlanta at Grady High School. He was incredibly successful, even though middle-class Jake has very little in his upbringing in common with Grady High School Atlanta. And like many jobs people get, especially in education, oh, young, strong guy coming in with a new degree. From somewhere else. Let's put him in the toughest school we got. I think that happened to me too. But Jake didn't know it that way. Jake went right in, got to know his kids, high school, had a great time. And like myself, when I got to North Marion Middle School and later other schools, he found the children couldn't read. A lot of the children couldn't read. And liking people sort of like I do, he's seeing very carefully, quickly, there's nothing wrong with these kids. We want to put labels on them. We want to put blame on those children. We want to put blame on those families. That's wrong, 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 wrong. Okay, they can't read. Our job's not to find blame. Our job's to teach them to read, whatever it takes. And I hope I modeled that in my life and career. But one of the things Jake set up was an after-school program that went for 5 years, where he took 15 to 20 of the toughest non-reading kids out of Grady High School and coupled the Great Leaps reading that he did with them and volunteers, not reading specialists, but coupled with his volunteers and then community people using an outward bound kind of a model for character development. You put the two things together, and then knowing the community and knowing the needs of the children, especially socially, those who graduated from the summer program then had a week at Sapelo Island. You can look that up. It's Gullah culture. It's African-American community that is intact, been intact, and has direct correlations with Africa. Very relevant to the cultural needs of these children. And here in inner city Atlanta, he's teaching them how to fish and throw cast nets. Oh, that's it. How are you ever going to use that? Well, guess what? When they succeeded and went to Sapelo, they fished, used cast nets, and got to know a community of fishing and cast nets and a way of life. Relevance, cultural relevance matters. Now, this is starting to bother me when I'm watching a major urban district. I didn't use their name so I won't get sued. In the teaching of American history, they wanted everybody, I'll go ahead and say it, BU in one borough or another on the same topic on the same day. That's not relevance. That's not American history relevance at all. You want to inspire your kids with things they know from where they know, with the history they should have pride in and can have pride in. Truthful, not propaganda, of course, but relevant to where I'm sitting then. That's part of my dad's secret. And Dad was a Canadian teaching in the blasted rural poor South, and he became a beloved teacher. But he knew who he was teaching. He knew their families, and he liked the kid. Boy, that's a whole lot of being relevant, I guess, is really liking where you're at and liking who you're working with and everything else. And then by knowing that relevance, I call it riding the horse, is when those magical moments come, using who they are and what you know to get an exchange going on, a meaningful conversational exchange going on. You know, the best teaching happens when the kid doesn't even know it's happening. You know, like when my kid has a pet turtle, I can use that pet turtle to talk about all kinds of things, from building construction if I need to the defense of Ticonderoga. You know, knowing who you are.
There's that direct tie between that, as you're saying, researching and knowing your kids to be able to make it relevant. If you obviously don't know who they are, how are you possibly going to make it relevant to who they are? That's where it's, step one of researching, knowing your kids and building that rapport to then strengthen your ability to make it relevant.
Yeah. And see, a whole lot of that is knowing those children as individuals. That really separates special educators from regular educators, because there's certain things I can't understand. It's like when someone is talking about their third period class as if that's an entity. That's why I was put in regular education for a while and was overwhelmed, though I'd be a very good teacher. There were so many needs in that group coming at me so fast that it was overwhelming. You know, I teach kids one at a time. This is special educator kind of one kid at a time, knowing them, what makes them tick, surveying constantly, knowing who I am, where I am, who are they, who can they be, how can I get them there, that kind of thing. Now, here comes a huge piece of relevance, and this is the next. Punishment. Oh, our kids have been punished immeasurably in the school system. I know how it feels because I couldn't read in the first grade. And it's made to feel like especially stupid. You got this, back then, the ability group, even within the classroom. So you got to be in the stupid group. You got to be on the stupid row. You got to be, and you knew it and everybody knew it. In fact, the whole neighborhood knew it. My mother knew it. You know, this is tough. It's completely punishing. And you're constantly being asked to do what you cannot do. And you're given the feeling it's your fault. That's difficult. That is very, very difficult. How do you undo it? Success. Success can undo that, but we have to know what we're doing. You know, we have to be aware of those punishers that are going on out there. And you see, many of the punishers are subtle, very subtle. So watching behavior, when I say punishment in all organisms leads to escape behavior. It just does. Even in cockroaches, turn on the light, the roaches run. Punishment leads to escape. So when I see signs of escape, I know there's punishment going on, however subtle. And this is important. You can't define punishment by an act or a punisher by an act. Everything is its own. You just can't define it. Like a corporal push-up, paddling, that's a punishment, all right. Well, not for the guy who gets to avoid the test. Not for the guy who knows it's going to lead to 2-week suspension and he can go play. Not to the guy who's going to take his licks like a man and come back in, Mr. Macho, the hero. That paddling that you thought was a punishment is a reward. We'll talk about rewards later. You can't define a punishment by a name of doing something. Punishment has one reason: to reduce or stop behaviors. Punishment. That's what punishment is. Punishment doesn't build, it tears down. Is there time for punishment? Well, yes. A 3-year-old takes off and wants to go run into the street where he or she could get run over. Now, I don't take a bullwhip, but I'm showing displeasure as I chase. No! In rescue, I'm showing displeasure, I'm showing alarm, I'm showing a lot of punishment things because that's a behavior I want to eliminate. So yes, there's room for the idea of reducing behaviors. Yes.
What are some things you'd see teachers and instructors do that were maybe unintentionally punishing, or that they were just unaware of the effects that is having on their student?
If you ask a child a question and you can't answer it and you kind of give a face and you very quickly move to someone else, that's very punishing. A lot of facial expression goes into this world, and cueing, things you don't say. Oh boy, there's just so many. I wanted a research paper to be done on subtle punishers in kindergarten and first grade classrooms on reading, because I know here's an idea of knowing punishment has happened. If you give a 4-year-old a blank piece of paper and pencil and tell them to fill up the paper, they'll fill it up. Now, if you're substitute teaching with a group of gifted, I know how to take up a whole period and have to do nothing. Give them a blank piece of paper and a pencil and tell them, in this class period, I'd like you to fill up your paper. Any questions? There goes your period. What do you want? Well, anything. Well, no, anything's not a... They have been so punished, so afraid of not pleasing you, that they can't produce. So a 4-year-old will fill up the paper in like 30 seconds. Your gifted class is going to take forever on just trying to figure out what to fill it up with. And so I think that's, I don't have to see the punishment exactly to know it happened.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the ripple in the pool. Boy, a big rock hit there, and I know it. What is it? We're going to have to look at that. What are these punishers? And a lot of them, I believe, are cultural. So we don't know we're doing the punishment. Here's one I call it very, and this is just racial punishment. My para needed 4 boys to come help move some tables. Okay, that's a reward. So my para picked 4 white boys in the class that's 50-50. Don't think the black boys didn't see that. I had to see it too. And I had to, the boys are gone now, I had to carry the table, I had to address it. Okay, that had to be, see, there's a punisher going on.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned too in the public embarrassment is the one you see all the time. That almost anybody that's been in the public school system has seen or experienced at some point. I mean, it was growing up, being asked to do something that you were incapable of doing, or that the instructor didn't know you could do successfully in front of the entire class, was commonplace, and in a variety of classes. But I think the common reading example that gets used is the popcorn reading, when all of your children or students are maybe on different levels, and you have a student that's ends up being embarrassed, being asked to do something that they can't do in front of their peers. I know before you mentioned you would know where basically each of your students were at and set them up to be successful in front of their peers, rather than
I could
embarrassed for not being able to perform.
In my reading class, and half the class couldn't read, you know, but I'm making sure they got taught to read. When I did round robin reading, whenever I called on anyone to read a section, I already knew they could read it. Okay, I'm never going to call on someone to do what they cannot do. That's a punisher. I've got to find out where they are and move them from there. And sometimes you've got to go out to them. I'll use this analogy. If someone's out there drowning and I can swim, my job is not to sit on shore and shout to them directions and try to teach them how to swim in. Sometimes you just got to go out there and get them. You know, yep, that means getting wet. I've got to come, again, that's understanding who are they, where are they, and come to them and bring them to where they need to be. I say sending kids to the office as a punishment. They meet other kids that got sent to the office. Suspension for kids who go and play video games. Paddling, you become the hero, like I said. There's so many things we think of as punishers that are not. And sometimes our punishers, the teachers, oh boy, who you send a kid to the lunchroom to work as punishment. You just insulted your entire lunchroom staff. That's incredible you did that. You demeaned them. They're not working as a punishment. They're working. They're necessary. So I'd send my kids to the lunchroom to work as a reward. And it was rewarding to work for the janitor. It's a reward. That is, be careful in who you are and what you say and what you do. I think too many of our teachers are on and tutors are on autopilot. You're saving lives, man. This is not autopilot stuff. Get involved. One of the things in my own career, and I taught everywhere from 4-year-olds to middle school, high school, Locke Psychiatric Hospital. Once I started feeling like I was on autopilot, man, it's time to move. Because that kid is not like other kids that seem the same. They're all unique. Oh, I just see the picture up there now of that little girl. Oh, man, did we have fun. I just always said, she so trusted me. It was wonderful. Middle schooler at the start, couldn't read. We used Great Leaps, taught her how to read. You just got a great relationship going, with that smiling, young, beautiful face.
And a genuine expression. That's the fun part. When you catch those little moments or those glimpses of success, and when the program becomes intrinsically rewarding and their own success is what drives their motivation. That's the
can you see the joy, joy? Here's a kid going through reading remediation, and if I look on the page, that looks like a phonics page. Man, that's like the Brussels sprouts of reading. Look at the joy. And that's what we're going for, and that's where we're getting our movement and our hopes. Very quickly, a reward. Rewards are that which increases behavior. Okay? Rewards are used to increase behavior. I'll go into a famous writer who wrote Punish by Reward Later, but he's really worrying about something that's not a reward. Bribes are not rewards. If someone refuses to do something, and you say, I'll give you $1 to do that, you just reinforce them not doing it, because the best way to get $1, they just learned, was to not do something. That's a bribe. A reinforcer, there's two reinforcers are kind of rewards. A positive reinforcer is something you do to increase a behavior. It can be a smile. Doesn't have to be. Too many people are thinking in terms of candies, dollars, quarters, Legos, playtime. A reward can be just your sincere smile. There's extrinsic rewards. That's stuff you give. Intrinsic, there's where we're going. That within, X without, in within, extrinsic. But sometimes you've got to use extrinsic to get to the intrinsic. The primary reinforcer of the whole world is food. And I know food makes people fat. Learned that the hard way. I also learned, I hear things that sometimes aren't true because we look at data. I heard sugar makes kids wild. I have no supporting data on that. I got a lot of supporting data on school lunches make kids wild, but it just may be the time of the day also. Maybe you want to take a little look deeper at that kind of stuff when we're looking at that. Then a negative reinforcer. Boy, people don't know what that word means. Immediately they think it's punishment. No, reinforcers increase behavior. And I already told you punishment decreases behavior. So a negative reinforcer is something you don't do or you remove to get a behavior to increase. Got it? So the typical one is someone's diddling around when they're supposed to be writing an essay, right? In a classroom, I just start walking their way. They start writing. I roll back, doesn't it? I negative by removing myself. I negatively reinforced them being on task, not a word having to be said. Another negative reinforcer tactic I used in the classroom stuff was you turned your work in at the end of the period, and I stood at the door and they handed it to me. Well, immediately the kids who didn't do it, somehow this just worked. They waited to be last. Well, they just killed their time outside playing in the whole time. They did it, I didn't. So I didn't punish them. There was a consequence. But then a child that had not done that work, now I'm walking with them, not saying, I'm going to take you to your class. I'm playing Mr. Care, Mr. Love, Mr. I want you to do so much better. I care so much. But really, what I'm doing is for him to remove that, he needs to do his work. So there's a negative reinforcer plan going on there with that. You know, boy, he won't bother me and steal my time. I just got to turn something in. One thing tantrums. I need to talk about tantrums because we're running out of time here. Tantrums are overt manipulations for somebody to get their way. They can be that temper tantrum of that 1 and 2 year old that you'll really watch. And then there's a subtle tantrums, you know, and don't have time to describe all those, but adolescents are great at their little tantrums that they can pull off. To make a tantrums must fail, and you must be patient, and you must make sure you know what the tantrum is for. What are they trying to get? You got to make sure they don't get it. The tantrum must fail. And here's the hard part. When you begin doing successful moves to end tantruming, the behavior increases. Grocery store. No, you cannot have that candy. Up it goes triple. That's called an extinction outburst. If you give in then, oh, Lord help you. Because now you set new limits on how far they can go. So understand the extinction outburst, that your plan is working because it's getting worse. Boy, is that a tough one to teach. It gets worse before it gets better. Yes, in tantruming, it does. But you must make sure the second you give into a tantrum, you've increased tantruming behavior, and that's going to make your job even harder and worse. Tantrums must fail. They must not get what they want. If you cannot make sure it fails, just make sure you get a tie. You're not going to win everything. But ties. Boy, the bribery. Let's understand bribery. Is this a bribe? I don't want to do the dishes. I'll give you $1 if you do the dishes. Is that a bribe? Clearly, that's a bribe. Now the child knows how to get $1 on every chore on the planet. You create a little mercenary. Now, if you leave Johnny alone today in class, idle, you just set up a bribe. The only way to get whatever that you were going to get is to mess with Johnny. Is this a bribe? Finish your homework and we'll have dessert. No, that's a consequence. You know, I didn't even say, don't finish your homework, you won't get dessert. I didn't even say it. It's just a consequence. Hey, when you finish this, you get that. Now, if you start going, I'll give you dessert if you do your homework tonight.
Yeah,
you just move the same behavior into a bribe, how you set it up.
Mm-hmm.
Stop goofing around. If you do your homework for an hour, I'll give you $1. Bribe. I'll give you 10 points if bribe. You know, and that's where that Alfie, I believe his name's Alfie Kahn book comes in. Yeah, he wrote Punished by Reward. Here's some listen to what he says here, and then I'll think about it for a minute. Rewards and punishments are both ways of manipulating behavior. All right, I was trained to be a behavior manipulator, Alfie. They are two forms of doing things to students. And to that extent, all of the research that says it's counterproductive to say to students, do this, or here is what I'm going to do to you, also applies to saying control through seduction. Now, this book, Punished by Reward, is probably, even if you disagree with every word he's saying, it's worth reading, because I worked with severe children who had no positive outlook in life if I couldn't somehow help that breakthrough. And there's people out there in academia that would actually say, who made you God? Why your control? Why do you have such control and power and manipulation? That's because the child is dysfunctional and will damn die if I don't use everything I've been taught to do and use so this child can become who they are meant to become. This is quite a loud discussion going on in the world of behavior. Who gave me the right? I go to the same thing in my parenting. I'm the parent and they're the child. My job there is to do the best I can with the powers within me to morally, respectfully do the very best I can so they can be who they're meant to be. We needed to talk about that punished by reward. When I got my paychecks for teaching, I was not being bribed, and there was nothing wrong with that going on. I earned it. Rewards can be earned. Natural consequences are great. Arranging your environment, and yes, all classrooms are contrived. Arranging your environment to approximate the real world is some of what we must do. And so I have to go into contention to this idea that we're controlling through seduction. That's the words of Alfie Kahn. And we need to know and be educated in that world of behavior and the foundations of what we're doing. Getting back to and we need to take data so we can make decisions on what we're doing. Everything from reading to, and we need to take data that other people can understand. And I like taking daily data because often data I read was at one instant in one time, and the child could have had a headache. So I like to, and there's always bounce in behavior. So I like taking regular data, looking at it, making decisions from it, and sharing it when I have problems. I expect a lot in my students. So some of the data I take in reading alerted me to, even though the progress wasn't as fast as I wanted it to be, the child was moving 10 times faster than it ever moved in their life. And see, so sometimes I could use data to get beyond myself and my own expectations to see that, man, I'm really winning here. And I just didn't know it because my expectations are so high. Tom Lovett once told me he was a great professor at the University of Washington that I was able to establish a relationship without ever going to Washington and couldn't afford it. But when I told him once I could teach my fifth graders multiplication facts to automaticity, within a couple of months, I could have them multiplying 3 mixed numbers with simplification at 40, 50, 60 digits a minute with no errors. And he said, did you take the data? And I, no, they were getting gold so fast. He goes, I don't believe you. I didn't have the data kind of to prove it. And here's where data matters awfully too. Often the system wants us to say we're so perfect that we'll ignore bad things that happen and not report it. I was on a committee covering about 4 or 5 Florida counties where children who needed intense psychiatric care paid for by the state, people had to bring their cases to us. Those who had nothing but anecdotal data had nothing, and boy, was I pushed to do things. The child needs help. You've got to, this happened, this happened, this happened. You didn't record any of it. I hate to tell you this, it didn't happen. You didn't record it, it didn't happen. I can't get you the help that child needs. This whole idea of making systems look good so you can meet whatever giant administrations want to look good is not truthful. Fights are fights, record them. Injuries are injuries, record them. Areas of high poverty and crime are going to have different data than areas where the entire environment is contrived for success. Anybody not understanding that needs a good sociologic talking to. We need the data so we can make the changes. We need the data to be real, to reflect what's really happening. When we see alarming trends in the data, we act upon it. If we see Black children are being suspended at 10-to-1 rates over whites, I need to look at that and find out why. I don't need to hide it or cover it up or give fake names or ask Jake's parents to come by and pick him up and not record it. We need the data, and we need it to be honest and truthful. Then we use that which is within us to educate, because we're teachers, we're educators, and we must work from reality always. Not the way it should be, but the way it is. I got in big trouble in Alachua County. We're an A- school district. When I had to bring forth to the superintendent, how can you be an A district when 30% of your children are functionally illiterate? Truth. Truth matters. It matters to who we are as human beings and what we do as teachers. Then we can see anomalies and act upon them. Boy, we could talk forever on these foundations. But if you build your foundations like the 5 pillars of reading, phonological awareness, phonics, vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension, if those 5 pillars need a foundation or they do nothing. The house built upon sand will wash away. We need to build our strong foundations on what I've just talked about today, these foundations of why we teach, who we teach, and understanding what our children need. And we are stronger when we, one, have professional distance. My job is my job, and I'm good at it. My home in my life is more important, way more important. When I'm rested, relaxed, and at peace with myself at home, I can be a giant when crisis hits. And I got smacked. There was a bus crash that killed 3 kids in my class, and I work with kids 8 hours a day. I was special ed, and I worked with them for years. 3 killed, 2 seriously injured. And I had to be the strength of the survivors. And I needed that relaxation can be community support. I had the support of my colleagues. I had the support of my neighborhood. I had the support of my family, my wife, and I had the support of my church. That allowed, I was not the giant. I was smashed. But having a foundational support, and I don't drifting sands, but having a foundational support in my teaching allowed me to stand strong in that hurricane or tsunami that hit me. Teaching's wonderful. I hope I pass just a piece of that on to people. If you're born to be a teacher, gosh, my friend Joe, he was working with Dotson in California, making good money when he found out he was a teacher. So he became one of the best higher ed teachers that ever came, that ever happened. You know, if you're, and teachers being denigrated right now, they're quitting by the tons. We're in a crisis now for our teachers. One, they have no individual respect. We need to give them that respect, to have that respect, to teach them how to earn that respect. And we need to have administrations and education that understand the needs of the children. That's the whole foundation of all of this, is knowing and understanding your children, their needs, and who they're meant to be. I hope this helps. Any last minute questions here? I just hit my hour, 2 minutes.
Yeah, we'll stay on for a little longer. I can leave the recording or cut it out if there are any questions that people don't want online or what have you. But yeah, either way, again, we'll send this recording out to folks to share to whomever it might be valuable for. Obviously, this experience has gotten from the real world and a lot of students that have passed through your classroom and that you've gotten to work with through your life. So
yeah, that's like I said, I've made every mistake you can. So come to me with what's going on. I could probably tell you what happened and how. Protect yourself, knowing the kids, professional distance. I could have talked about that forever. That's where problem happens. You know, if you become the first person in this world to that abused adolescent who nobody's ever cared about, who's been used, they may offer themselves to you. What do? You've got to have that professional distance. I'm the adult. You're the child. I was never a hugging teacher at all. That really bothers me when I see that going on. And again, that was the population I worked with. I worked with a population of children who've been very sexually abused, and a hugging kind of sign could be easily misinterpreted. You know, professional distance. I am not one of them. I'm not going to start talking Ebonics in my classroom because most of my kids talk Ebonics. You know, that's not who I am. Now, after about 8 years, suddenly that language could flip in because it's a language that I was surrounded by. But you just got to be real. And there's nothing wrong with being real. This whole idea that you have to be who you're teaching. No, you've got to be a caring teacher. You know, we're all Americans for the most part. And then my Mexican children love me too. You know, I'm never going to be a Mexican. You know, I'm a human being. They're human beings.
Yeah, it's a combination
of not.
Yeah, being who you are and knowing who they are and being honest in both of those things, and not trying to be who you're not.
Yeah, that's so critical. I mean, there's many things this world of people who don't have real experience are trying to teach us. They're all dead wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so many instances of this. Like, everybody needs Algebra 1. No, they don't. You know, we've got to move these children into trig classes because because our numbers are all wrong. So now you move a bunch of kids who don't know their timetables into trigonometry classes? Give me a break. You're doing harm.